was a sunny day of celebration, a street festival bursting with pride.
Yeah, we're having fun, so much fun!
Canada's proud of pride, eh?
We get to see the maple trees, maple sugar on the maple leaves. We got the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
G'day, eh? On Sunday, Canada wrapped up its Pride Month with celebrations and parades across the country, sending the message that everyone belongs here in our beautiful mosaic of a country. The Prime Minister kicked things off in Ottawa by raising the Pride flag and stating that $1.5 million in federal money would be spent to make Pride parades safer this year.
You know, our country, like the flag, is a mosaic. We're all different, we all have our distinctions, we're all Canadian. And one of our strengths of Canada is recognizing that people can be who they want to be, they can love whom they want to love, they can live where they want to live. The federal government, on whose seat we are the defender of those rights. We are the defender of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. When we stand up for all the rights of all our fellow Canadians, we strengthen our own. In a time where, unfortunately, around the world, there's a backlash struggling against the progress that has been made. In this time, Canada will always stand up for the vulnerable and for the equal rights that we cherish. Yes, we can take pride in how far we've come, but we should also recognize that there is much more to do. Far too many Canadians continue to face hatred and discrimination because of just who they are and whom they love. And that's why Canada's new government is supporting Fierté Canada Pride, to ensure and help have successful and safe Pride celebrations across this land.
While some countries, including the United States, are taking rights away, Carney said Canada will stand up for rights around the world. According to Statistics Canada, the Government of Canada adopted the use of the acronym 2SLGBTQI+ to refer to two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex people, and those who use other terms related to gender or sexual diversity. Statistics Canada uses the acronym 2SLGBTQ+ for data analysis purposes, as information is not yet specifically collected around intersex people in surveys, and the A stands for asexual. As of 2024, 1.3 million 2SLGBTQIA+ people call Canada home, around 4.4% of the population, age 15 or older. And Canada is the first country to produce census data on non-binary and transgender people. Gay marriage has been legal here since 2005, supported by 3/4 of Canadians, with 70% in favor of same-sex couples having the right to adopt and or raise children. Canada's followed British law in the past, up until the late 1800s, when homosexuality was still considered a crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison, but reforms to the law began in the 1940s. Public sentiment began to shift further in 1965 when Everett George Clippert, a mechanic from the Northwest Territories, was arrested on charges of gross indecency and deemed a dangerous sexual offender by prison psychiatrists. His prison term was extended indefinitely, a ruling that was scrutinized and criticized in the mainstream press. And several members of Canada's Parliament, including the then Justice Minister Pierre Trudeau, began calling for reform. And once he was elected, his government passed Bill C-150 in May 1969, an omnibus bill decriminalizing private sexual acts between two people over the age of 21. In 1977, Quebec became the first jurisdiction in Canada to amend the Provincial Charter of Human Rights to include sexual orientation as a prohibited ground for discrimination. Still, gays and lesbians continued to face discrimination, including ongoing police harassment. In 1981, tensions came to a head in Toronto in what became known as Canada's Stonewall, when more than 300 people were arrested at bathhouses, and a crowd of over 3,000 people marched on Queen's Park, smashing car windows and setting fires in protest. This led to the establishment of the Lesbian and Gay Pride Day, which drew 1,500 people in its first year and has been held every year since, though Toronto didn't officially endorse them until 1991. And in 2014, Toronto hosted the 4th World Pride event, which included a week-long human rights conference. In 1982, when the Canadian Constitution was repatriated, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms adopted Bill C-15, which guaranteed the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability, but didn't specify sexual orientation until 1995, when the Supreme Court ruled that the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination included sexual orientation as a prohibited basis of discrimination. In 1999, the court ruled that same-sex couples must be afforded the same rights as opposite-sex couples in a common law relationship. And in 2000, the government passed Bill C-23, bringing the federal statutes in line with the ruling. In 2016, the terms gender identity and gender expression were added to federal human rights legislation in Canada to provide legal protection for transgender and gender-diverse people. As of 2017, gender identity or gender expression has been explicitly codified in all human rights legislation at the provincial, territorial, and federal level. In 2021, the House of Commons voted to ban conversion therapies. The Department of Justice now defines gender identity as a person's internal and deeply felt sense of being a man or a woman, both or neither. A person's gender identity may not align with the gender typically associated with their sex.
And though there is more public awareness and visibility of trans lives than ever before, data reveals distressing levels of anti-trans discrimination, harassment, and violence. In an Ontario survey of trans people, 18% were turned down for a job, 20% were physically or sexually assaulted, and 34% were verbally threatened or harassed, all because of their gender identity. So Bill C-16 protects us from being discriminated against because of how we identify or express our gender in areas like immigration, criminal law, federal services, and the census. It also makes spreading hate propaganda based on gender identity and gender expression a criminal offense, which helps protect our trans and gender diverse communities. And while achievements at the federal level are important advancements for human rights, similar protections are lacking across Canada's provinces and territories. Despite Bill C-16, some provinces and territories are still in the process of amending their human rights protections to include gender identity and gender expression. And not all provinces and territories explicitly protect gender expression. And this leaves serious gaps for discrimination on these grounds in the healthcare, education, and justice systems, because these systems are governed by provincial and territorial human rights law. So Bill C-16 is not enough. Provinces and territories must measure up to the federal government's action. Make gender identity and gender expression protected grounds throughout Canada.
Discrimination on the basis of gender identity is still prevalent in Canada, with support for LGBTQ+ rights declining around the world, especially over transgender youth, and some provinces are still imposing severe restrictions on trans kids in sports, and they require parental consent for name changes or pronoun usage or hormone therapy. The Canadian Bar Association on Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Gender Expression, also known as SOGI, states that the rights of children and youth with respect to sex, sexual orientation, gender identity and gender expression, SOGI, apply to Canadian children and youth in a wide range of areas, including but not limited to privacy, healthcare, sexual health education, identification documents, use of facilities, access to services, education, including gay-straight alliances, choice of companions at school events, and SOGI inclusive curricula, employment, child protection, age of consent laws, youth justice and detention, and parental recognition. Transgender surgery isn't fully covered by Canadian healthcare. It's a paid procedure unless it's considered medically necessary.
So here with more information is registered nurse and case manager of trans and non-binary care at London Intercommunity Health Centre, Robin Hodgson. Welcome to the show.
First of all, let me say, Robin, it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so let's kick off this conversation. I want to know, what does the landscape of healthcare look like for transgender and non-binary people in Canada right now?
Well, we are still very much a medical model. Most people that are looking to medically transition, and we should say there's social and medical, but for medical reasons, you need to check in with a primary care provider, a doctor, or nurse practitioner.
Okay.
So how far do you think that we've come when it comes to education and inclusion training for healthcare workers?
Yeah, for healthcare workers, if we go back about 20 years, the average doctor, nurse practitioners were just new at the time, would get about an hour in their core curriculum. Now, as it stands today, we're up to about 2 days, between a day and 2 days that is included in core curriculum. But for those folks that didn't have the benefit of having that in their primary education, they can get courses through organizations like Rainbow Health Ontario, Transcare BC, to become knowledgeable and provide this care in their offices.
Let's talk about gender affirming care, like surgery. How is it covered at all under?
So most jurisdictions in Canada have some type of coverage, but it varies widely. And so anybody that is looking at wanting to advance to some type of surgical intervention should check with their provincial authority, or back to these primary care providers that we first talked about doing that. We do have to separate out, and there's a difference between surgeries that people may be considering that are considered medically necessary, and we separate it top and bottom. So it could be chest surgery, augmentation, or removal in some cases, or genital surgeries. The surgeries on the top side, there isn't, well, I shouldn't say isn't. If we're looking to develop something, we want to have a course of hormonal care that has started. But we do have a group of folks that identify as non-binary, and they may not need that hormonal component. And that is something in the province of Ontario and most provinces that is covered. The genital surgeries are quite a bit different. We need, in the guidelines that are produced by the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, recognize that in almost every case, we're going to remove some gonads. And when we do that, they produce hormones, and hormones not only give us the secondary sex characteristics, but also affect bone health. And in doing that, we need to know that somebody is going to be able to manage that hormonal therapy and that they're going to be stable on it.
But since the Cittadini was elected back in office, many American LGBTQ plus people are considering leaving the U.S. Who can blame them? Some of them are possibly coming to Canada.
Protect trans kids!
When Kelly's son Ollie came out as trans, she became a fierce advocate.
When you're not strong!
That advocacy has taken her to a small Minnesota town.
Welcome to the house.
A home for young people trying to get on their feet.
They have their own set of towels.
Many of those who stay here likely to be queer or trans.
It is volunteer weekend. We're calling it Furnishings and Finishings Weekend.
A big community effort in a country rolling back much of what they fought for.
This is a way that we can show up and we can show these young people that they're not alone, and that no matter what the federal government is saying, that there are people that support them, that have their back.
Kelly knows a thing or two about living in a place that has your back. It's why she and her family moved here a year and a half ago.
We can joke like, oh yeah, we're refugees from Florida. We fled Florida. We uprooted our family because it did not feel safe for us to stay there, right? It didn't feel like a flippant choice that we made and let's go live in the freezing cold of Minnesota from the beaches of Florida.
We aren't using Kelly's last name or saying exactly where her family lives because of their safety concerns. One of Kelly's children, Ollie, is trans.
Essentially, we were kicked out of our church and our school. And so that was beginning of high school. And then, of course, Mama Bear comes out, and I became a fierce advocate and ally for my kid and for the queer community at large.
That advocacy caught the attention of a conservative group.
and they just came after us, and it felt scary and threatening. And my husband served in the Marines, very much believes in protecting his family, felt like he couldn't do that, and that we all had targets on our backs. So for my husband, he will tell you that that was his turning point. So at that point, that's when we said, it's time to go. I mean, of course I knew it was traumatizing. Of course I knew how hard it was for our children to leave Florida and everything they knew. But election night, whew, my 11-year-old started crying, and she said, does this mean we're gonna have to move again?
You actually feel safe, that guard.
For Ollie, moving to Minnesota meant just being able to walk down the street without fear.
I noticed people's body language and the way they were looking at me or weren't looking at me really. It felt different, it did. Yeah, a cultural difference, it felt like. It's a really good thing. We feel safer.
Or he did. The Trump administration's rollback of trans rights has been swift, beginning on day one.
As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Other orders followed, defunding gender-affirming care for youth, banning trans people from serving in the military, even requiring federal staff to remove pronouns from email signatures.
The last couple of weeks, the inauguration speech, the executive orders, how has that left you feeling?
It's left me feeling pretty scared and uncertain, and I didn't think it was going to happen so fast. I didn't think so much was going to happen so fast and it would be so bad.
Ollie doesn't want to have to move again, but if he starts to feel unsafe, he's keeping his options open.
Where are you looking?
Mainly Canada, because it's so close, and we've heard that the protections are better for people like us, or at least not so hostile. So Canada is probably the top of the list.
To qualify for asylum in Canada, you must prove a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, which includes LGBTQ plus people.
Is it weird, I mean, to sort of be thinking about leaving America, to have considered that?
It's so dystopian. We're living the Handmaid's Tale. Like, how is this the United States of America? Words come out of my mouth, and in my head, I'm like, this can't be real. This can't, right? It's so bizarre. We're in the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world. And its citizens are looking at asylum in other countries. Make it make sense.
And even though the backlash towards the LGBTQ plus community is growing in recent years, there's still millions who will continue to fight for freedom and human rights. And even in authoritarian states like Viktor Orban's Hungary, where more than 100,000 people turned out in Budapest on the weekend to protest despite government threats.
Donald Trump just got a rude awakening around the world. What you just saw there at the beginning of this video was a massive protest of over 100,000 people in Budapest, in Hungary. So Donald Trump's buddy, Viktor Orban, banned LGBTQ pride events and banned pride parades, and has basically done in Hungary what Donald Trump is copying here in the United States. And so Orban warned that if you were to throw an LGBTQ pride parade in Budapest or anywhere in Hungary, there would be massive consequences. The government would hurt you. And the people said, we are showing up. In essence, the No Kings protests here in the United States, we're seeing that around the world. And frankly, it really started in Europe with the No Kings protests and was brought here to the United States. Let me just show you another angle of this, because Donald Trump should know that his crew right now of people like Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un are really not all that popular internationally. Take a look right here. This is another angle in a bridge in Budapest. You can just see how many people are there. It's massive, but it really reminds me a lot of the No Kings protest we saw across the United States. Play this clip.
The Asher and Lyric LGBTQ+ Danger Index declared Canada to be the most gay-friendly country in the world in the Travel Index in 2023. And in 2024, we ranked 9th in the Poldex Equality Index. In other words, Canada's proud of pride. Everyone deserves to love and be loved. Elbows up! And equal rights everywhere for everyone. Stay tuned for more on Political Drain Canadian Edition.
Hey, yeah, you. Before you click away to watch someone unbox a tactical toothbrush, let's talk about something real. Political Drain isn't just another content mill. We're a digital front in a very real war. Not with bullets, but with ideas, with action, and with solidarity. We pair urgent news with critical education. And we build community around actual resistance, not the hashtag kind, the kind that moves. But here's the thing, none of this is free. It isn't. Behind every video is time, labor, research, and some weird guy asking if we're gonna pay the hosting bill. And yeah, some of that money goes to things we can't necessarily say out loud. If you know, you know. Let's just say, our special ops aren't Call of Duty LARPers. They're people making real moves to protect, uplift, and organize. You're not just funding a channel. You're funding a resistance network in a world where capital still calls the shots. Unfortunately, in a system built on artificial scarcity, even mutual aid has a price tag. And if we want to grow, if we want to win, we need your help. We need your help. So if you've got even a few bucks to spare, toss it our way. It's not for ads, it's not for merch drops, but for people making moves in the shadows so others can do it in the light. It's just us and you. So fund the mission, fund the fight, fund the future, because nobody's coming to save us. We save each other. That's how this works. Follow us on all these things you see here, and our link tree is in the description. Maybe even get some merch.